It is now my pleasure to ask our host for today's reception, the Honourable Grant Robertson, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance and Member of Parliament for Wellington Central, to now address us.
O tihe Māori ora, he mihi ana na mana whenua ki tēnei rohi, a taranaki whānui te upaka o te ika, te ati awa whānui katoa, tēnā koutou, a tēnā koutou, a tēnā koutou katoa. E nā tini mate, haere, haere, haere atura. A piti hono tātai hono, rātou te hunga mate kia rātou. A piti hono tātai hono, rātou te hunga ora kia tātou. E nā mana, e nā reo, a rangatirama, a tēnā koutou, a tēnā koutou, a tēnā koutou katoa. No mai, haere mai ki te whare paramata. Welcome to Parliament. Miriam, thank you for your kind introduction. It is a select group of 100 exactly who are in the room today. You should feel honoured and proud to be a part of that group, but I do apologise to the Holocaust Centre and all of those who would have liked to have been here today. It is unfortunately the world that we live in, but I thank you very much for respecting the public health restrictions that we operate under. They are designed to keep us all safe, but I'm very grateful that we can all come together today in these circumstances to acknowledge International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Can I acknowledge all of the members of the Diplomatic Corps who are in the room today? There are many of you, so I will not go through you one by one, but I acknowledge all of you here today. I want to acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues, Greg O'Connor, the MP for Ohariu, Camilla Bellich, Labour List MP, Nicola Willis and Chris Bishop, National List MPs. Acknowledge all of them for being here today, and also Deputy Mayor of Wellington, Sarah Free. Sarah, thank you for coming along as well. Distinguished guests, one and all, no mai, haere mai, welcome along today. It simply is my job to welcome you, but I cannot resist the opportunity to pick up on a little on the theme of the day. And when we think about such a cruel, inhumane, and extreme extermination of a group of people, we can have a tendency, as Jeremy said when we were out at Makara earlier, to put it into a very impersonal context. That 6 million people should die is a number so vastly unimaginable that we put it into that statistic rather than into its individual set of circumstances. And that's why I was especially moved by both Eva and Boyd's stories earlier today at Makara, bringing that to us as a very individual set of circumstances, different, but both particularly insightful and moving. And so to Boyd and Eva, I say thank you very much for sharing those stories with us. It is acts of individual and collective resistance that we think of today. There are stories told often of the resistance forces throughout Europe. There are stories told, as we heard today, of individuals who supported and sheltered those who were being persecuted and lived under the threat of being killed. And as we reflect on those collective and individual acts of resistance, it is timely for us to think about what that means for us today. I acknowledge the presence in the room of our Chief Human Rights Commissioner, Paul Hunt. In New Zealand, we have had to face extraordinary circumstances, particularly drawn to our attention on the 15th of March 2019, of how hatred, bigotry, prejudice and violence can come together. And each of us in our daily lives, I believe, has a responsibility to stand up to that. We have a collective responsibility. We invested in the likes of Paul and his commission. We do it every day when we go to the United Nations, Miriam, and we support those resolutions. But it's the individual acts of resistance to racism, the individual acts of resistance to bigotry, the individual acts of resistance to dis and misinformation that I believe is the call of today's theme. We owe it to every single individual of the more than 6 million who were exterminated. We owe it to the survivors, who I acknowledge again today. We owe it to the families of survivors. And I thought Eva captured well the trauma, sometimes the stigma that was associated with families of survivors. I acknowledge that we today owe it to them to make sure that our individual acts of resistance against prejudice continue. Each of us knows the moment in our lives, in our days, when perhaps we've turned away from those moments where we could show that individual resistance. And each of us knows that we can and should do better in those moments. But as a country, as a collective, we have an opportunity to lead, and we have an opportunity to say never again. Never again to the Holocaust, never again to letting go moments of racism, bigotry, or prejudice without resisting and showing our support for all those who have had to suffer this before. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. You are most welcome in the Houses of Parliament. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.